Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm just glad you guys listened to Billy Joel today when you came in here. You didn't expect that, did you? But talk about making room, right? Like, everybody's got to make room for him. He's got a concert on CBS today at 9:30, which I just feel like is like God's like, hey, man, here you go, happy, whatever. But no, I haven't really had a lot to, I really haven't had an opportunity to talk about this whole like Man of the Year thing. I think the first thing I posted was just like, what an honor, 3 words. And then I like read the article and I just was like, what in the world? Like, I just felt so surreal. I would say this kind of just like at the shoot, and I think it's important and worth saying. One is that behind every Man of the Year is a Woman of the Year. And I believe that to be very true. I do. And I would just say this, every sacrifice that we've made, it like, yeah. Dang it. But no, we've done it together. And so I am very thankful for her. And then I would say this too, that this is, like they said in the video, it is a celebration of what God has done. And I think that if anyone would have came like 7 years ago and they would have been like, the story could have been how this young guy ruined this great church. And so I'm so thankful that is not the deal. I feel like that's what it is. It is a celebration of what God has done, and so I'm so thankful for that. And as we talk about the make room stuff, really that's what this project is. It is a celebration of what God has done, and it also is an investment in what we believe God is going to do. And so we look back and it's like, man, look at what God has done. We need more. We need this part of the building to look different. And so that's what we're doing. But it's also this belief that it's going to continue, that God's going to continue to help more people know Jesus better through this whole deal. And so for those of you who've made a commitment to the project, man, thank you so much. We're blown away by how God is continuing to provide. We do have commitment cards on your seats, and I would just say this to you. If you've yet to make a commitment, man, we are believing in faith that God is going to provide, and we need every bit. And so every bit. So if you've yet to make one, man, and you're feeling like you need to, this would be a great weekend to do that. And you can fill it out and drop it in the offering receptacle as you head out those doors there. And so that's it. But hey, we're in a series right now where we're calling it Dysfunctional, and we've been looking at Abraham's life really since the fall. And we've been walking through Abraham's life, and we saw Isaac. When Isaac was born, we started calling it side character energy, and then when, as Isaac is getting ready to die, we're going to call it dysfunctional because, man, this is not the type of family that you would expect to be like a biblical family. And you'll even see some of that in the text this morning. But as I was thinking about like even just this whole like dysfunction, right? A lot of the dysfunction that we get, it comes from our families, if you think about it, right? Like you get the things, like you get it from, maybe you have like, you have a parent that likes to stir it up and you like to stir it up, or, we inherit things from our families. And even I was just thinking like low key, the things that I do in my life, that I do because of my parents, okay? Like, and even just like stuff, if you just think about it, like I do this because of them. One is that I live in Springfield, Missouri. Like, that's because of them. Like, we lived in Nebraska, we moved to Springfield, they thought it was great, and here I am. And so, like, that's just kind of how it goes. Even thinking about, like, some people tell me, they're like, hey, you look like your dad. I don't see it, but if it's true, I would have got that from him, I think. And even stuff, too, like, you think of, sports teams, okay? I have Nebraska on my shoes, and I love Nebraska, and I can tell you right now, it's not because they're winning anything. It's because of my dad. You put it in there. And you inherit things from your family. Even if you think about, like, maybe some of you can think of people that you know, and you look at their story, and it's like, it's sad. And as you look at their story, what makes it so sad is you see that they're making the same mistakes that their parents made. And if you really zoom out, you can even see like generations of just like, man, that stinks. And that's one of the reasons why we do what we do, because we believe that the gospel has the power to come in and change things. And we'll see the gospel's power to change things and to show grace even in our text this morning. So we pick it up here in Genesis chapter 26, verse 1, and it says this. It says, Now there was a famine in the land. And the former famine was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt to dwell in the land of which I should tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and your offspring I will give all of these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge and my commandments and my statutes and my laws. Man, talk about like living in your parents' shadow, right? Like God gives him this promise, but it's all about his dad. You know, it's like, hey, Abraham. And Isaac's like, hey, I'm right here. He's dead. It's like, but if you look at this, it's really interesting what's going on here. So one, you have a famine in the land. And so what would have been really common if there was, during a famine in the land would be everybody would find a place where there wasn't a famine, and they would go to that place. And so what's happening here is there's this famine in the land, the promised land that God has promised to give to Abraham and his descendants. And because there's a famine, everybody that lives there is going to Egypt because there isn't a famine in Egypt. It was just common practice. When things dried up, you would go to a place where it wasn't like that. And here you have Isaac, okay? And Isaac is like, well, I guess that's what I should do. There's a famine. We go to Egypt. That's what people do when there's a famine. They go to Egypt. But the problem with that is that God's like, don't. And if you think about that, like Isaac, it's not just Isaac. That Isaac would have had a clan that he was leading. That there would have been people who would have been following him. There would have been people who were like his people. And so they're seeing all of these folks head to Egypt, and they've got to be thinking, well, yeah, that's what you do when things dry up. And here you have Isaac telling them, hey, we're just going to stay here and grind it out. And they've all got to be thinking, like, what do you mean? Like, we go. But God told him, and he obeyed it. And probably the reason why he trusted God's voice so much was because of his dad. That his dad in Genesis chapter 12, God shows up, speaks to him, and he leaves everything behind to follow God. I'm assuming he probably would have heard that from his dad. But beyond that, notice what, it says to sojourn in the land. Like, it makes sense to stay in a place that is yours, but he's saying, hey, I want you to sojourn there. This meaning like, hey, this isn't this isn't your land yet. That you have no legal rights, you have no legal status, that really I'm saying I want you to stay in this land that is not yours, and really you are going to be utterly dependent on the grace and the favor of the foreign kings that live in this land, which would have been an incredible act of trust, but Isaac does. And so you have this thing. He probably learned that from his father, but then as it goes forward, you see that he ends up making one of the same mistakes that his dad made. In verse 6, so Isaac settled in Gerar. And when the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, she is my sister. Behind every great man of the year is a sister of the year too. For he feared to say, my wife, thinking lest the men of that place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. And when he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, she's your wife. How then could you say she is my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought lest I die because of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might have easily lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. This is also something he got from his dad. Makes you wonder how his dad passed that along to him. Maybe he's like, okay, so if you're ever in a bind, just say she's your sister. I don't know. I mean, he's like, I did it twice. No, I don't think that's what. But he does this. And there's a couple things worth noting here that are just, kind of interesting. One, notice that it says that the text says they were there for a long time. And meaning, so Isaac's like, man, if they find out that she's my wife, they're going to take her, that she's really pretty, like they're going to, and they've been there for a long time and nothing's happened to her. And most of what I read said that like Isaac, what that is saying is it's saying that all of Isaac's fears were unfounded. But because he lied, even though his fears were unfounded, he had to continue to lie. And that's one of the reasons why lying is one of the many reasons why it's never a good idea to lie. But sometimes when you lie, what ends up happening is you might lie about something, and then you realize you didn't need to lie about it, but you got to keep the lie going because you feel like you got to keep it going, even though you realize, man, I didn't really need to do that. It was completely unfounded. And then there's a part here, then there's a part where it says it's all Isaac laughing with Rebekah, okay? And like, if you have like one of those apps that has different translations of the Bible, you're going to find that it's going to be translated many different ways. That sometimes it's translated by using a word that husbands and wives do. Like it could just be one of those things. But my question about that whole deal is, why in public? Like, I just think about this, okay? He's doing something with his wife that causes the king of this land to think, that's not his wife. And he's doing it in public in a place where the king can see it. Like, just think about that for a second. Like, he's like, oh, I'll be fine. And we don't really know what they were doing. There's all kinds of stuff, but I like the way that Kent Hughes in his commentary describes it. He says that he was interacting with Rebekah in an unsisterly way, and I think that sums it up very well. That is I'm quoting a biblical commentary. That's what he said, okay? And so that's going on, but then all of this is happening. He's doing something that he should not have done, putting everybody in the land at great risk. You would think that the king would like make him feel his fury, but he does the exact opposite. He says, I'm going to issue a decree that makes sure that no one touches her and no one touches you, showing again that his fears were completely unfounded. He would have been fine. And the crazy thing is this is grace. This is God's grace on Isaac. And as the text goes forward, even though Isaac did this really stupid thing, God continues to show him grace. Look at this in verse 12. It says, and Isaac sowed in the land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. And it shows us something about grace. That grace isn't about earning. It's something that God just gives. That Isaac's in this situation where he doesn't deserve this. He hasn't earned this. And yet here you have God show him grace that he doesn't deserve. Now, before you're like, man, Abimelech seems like a decent guy. Like, he ended up looking out for Isaac and he didn't hurt him even though he lied. You see that he might have been okay with the lie, but he wasn't okay with Isaac's success. Look at this in verse 16. It says, and Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. It's just showing that in all generations, we have a problem with people being more successful than we are. That he was cool with the lie, but as soon as Isaac started to grow in success and started to grow in prominence, he's like, this is where I'm going to intervene and ship you out. Now, looking at this text, as the text goes forward, we don't have really time to look at all these verses, but basically what happens is he's got all these people who are following him. He's got land, he doesn't have lands, but he has people and he has like crops and herds and all this stuff, and they're in a famine. And so he's got to figure out a way to provide sustenance for all of this stuff that is now his. And so what he does is he goes and he starts digging up wells. And basically what happens over the next few verses is Isaac digs a well, finds water, which is incredible in the middle of a famine, and then as soon as he starts getting the water, someone who owns the land comes and says, nope, this is my land. And he does it 3 times. And so Isaac's probably at this place after this has happened 3 times where he's done the work to dig the well, to provide for his people, and he's feeling incredibly frustrated. Thinking, how in the world am I going to handle everything that God has given to me? And it's almost like as soon as he reaches that breaking point, God shows up and he tells him something that he's already told him. Look at this in verse 24. It says, and God shows up and says, I am the God of your father, Abraham. Fear not, for I'm with you. I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. Now, notice he isn't told to build an altar. It's just something that he spontaneously does. Where would he have gotten that? From his dad. That when God showed up to Abraham, what did Abraham do? He built an altar. And also it's worth noting too that he finds himself in Beersheba and he's like, I'm going to stay here. And there is this sense where Isaac is he's just saying, he's like, well, since God's here, since God's revealed himself to me here, I don't want to leave, so I'm just going to stay. But even though that happens, even though he has this incredible moment with God that's so impressive that it's recorded in Scripture, that he still is like, yeah, but we got to get a well. We still need water for these people, and so they're digging, trying to find water, and they've yet to find it. And while this is happening, remember Abimelech, the guy who he lied about his wife being his sister, and the guy who kicked him out of the land? Well, he shows back up. In verse 28, it says it's Abimelech and two of his commanders. So he's got this like flex. He's like, I want you to know that I have two military generals with me. And they said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done nothing but good to you and have sent you away in peace. You are now blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. And in the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths. And Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That you have this picture of Isaac, who is a refugee in their land. And he has become so powerful that the king of the land is like, hey, why don't we just let bygones be bygones, right? Like, you lied to me, I shipped you out, why don't we just call it good? And it just shows the amount of favor that God has shown Isaac. And what I think is interesting is that only a year has passed since he was sent away. And it just shows how powerful he's become, how much God's hand has been on him. And basically, what the king Abimelech is saying is he's saying, if I fight you, I'm not fighting you, I'm fighting the Lord, and I don't want to fight the Lord. And so he's aware of this, he sees this, and then as the text ends, they were digging that well, and you find that they found water. Look in verse 32. That same day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug and said to him, we have found water. And he called it Sheba, and therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. Meaning that this was such a significant occurrence that this was written probably 500 years after this happened, that 500 years after this happened, they're still calling it Beersheba as a reminder of God's faithfulness to Isaac, just showing that these decisions, man, that you continue to go forward. And so as I think about this text, I think of how to apply it. And really I see three ways that we can look at it from the past, the present, and the future, because all of that is on display. That even part of the reason why this text, if it feels kind of repetitive to stuff that you've seen with Abraham, part of what the author's communicating is that Isaac's doing what his dad did, that he's similar to his father, that he's picking up some of his traits. And so there's incredible value in the past, the present, and the future that you see here in the text. And first, let's talk about the past. And so what you see here from the past is you see from the past that we need to learn from those who've gone before us. That when you think about the past, that it is really important that we learn from those who have gone before us. You know, when you think of Isaac, he had the good and the bad. Like, there are good things here that he learned from his dad. He built an altar. He learned that from his dad. He learned that he could trust God's voice even when like nothing else really made sense. He was able to trust God's voice and stay put when everyone else is leaving. Like, he would have saw his dad do that. But there's also negative. He also ends up lying about his wife and calling her his sister. And so you've got that. And if I were to guess, okay, that if you were to look back on your past and just think about it deeply, okay, you're probably going to be able to find really good things that you could learn from. And if I were to guess, if you were to look at your past and to look at it really deeply, that you also can probably find things that you do, that you saw someone else do, that honestly are making your life harder in the present. What we see from this text is we've got to learn to let the good impact us and not the bad. You know, and I imagine maybe there are even some of you here, and your story's tough. And the reason why it's tough is because you're at the place that you're at because of a bunch of decisions that have been made by people who were before you. And you're just like, you feel like there's nothing you can do. And what I would say to you is I would say you can't let that cripple you. Isaac was able to move past lying about his wife. I would also say this too, that if you notice what God says to Isaac when he does the same thing that his dad did. He's not like, hey man, don't worry about it. Your dad did it. You didn't know any better. He didn't. But he punished him through Abimelech. And so even for you, maybe you find yourself falling into some of these patterns. You feel like, man, I'm going to get a pass. I don't know that you get a pass. That there comes a point in your life where you've got to start taking responsibility, even if you're at the situation that you're at and no fault of your own. And that's where we're learning from those who've gone before you can be incredibly powerful. That for all of us, we would be so wise to look back on our past regularly in ways that we can learn from it. That I'm sure that all of us have influence in our life that are positive in our past. Parents, mentors, pastors, and they've all probably instilled things in you that you would be wise to think about, to reflect on, and maybe even write down somewhere. That in doing that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That you've already been taught that. You're just reminding yourself of something that you've heard before. There's value in learning from the past. There's also value in looking back on the past and thinking about things that didn't work. Looking back and be like, man, I tried that once and it didn't work. And learning from the past and saying, okay, I'm not going to do that again. It actually doesn't go well when I say she's my sister. You can learn from that. There's value, and maybe even some of you, maybe there are things in your life or things in your past that you look back on, and man, it made for a really tough season. And maybe you even feel yourself gravitating towards that thing. Man, you'd be so wise to look back and say, man, that did not go well. I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Don't tell yourself this time's going to be different. Tell yourself, you know what, I'm not going to make that mistake. There's power. And the past can do that. You got to remember those who've gone before you, but it's part of the deal. There's also this incredible value when you think about the past, in looking back and remembering things that God has done for you. It causes you to trust him today, and we'll look at that in a second, but really there's value in looking back. Because I imagine that all of us probably have stories of where God has really come through for us. God did something significant. God did something almost miraculous that in the moment we're like, I cannot believe that even happened. And I would also bet that if that happened, if things like that happened to you more than 5 years ago, I bet you don't think about it as much as you used to. And you would be very wise to recall those stories and remember his past faithfulness. It's not that you've forgotten about it, but it's just not active in your mind, that you can use the past to make it active. I would even say this too. Some of you have been walking with Jesus for a really long time. You've been walking with him for a long time. Things are going well. There's a blessing of God on your life as you're walking with him. And you have forgotten what he has saved you from. And there is value in looking back at your life and thinking, man, what would my story be if I didn't put my trust in him? Where would that take me? Because what it does is it causes you to have this appreciation of what he's done that maybe you would forget. because you've been so far removed because of time. So we see the value of the past. We also see the value of the present. And part of the present, what we see here in the text, is that in the present, we need to remind ourselves of things we already know. That we need to remind ourselves of things that we already know. That sometimes we do this with God, where we're like seeking the profound. I just need something new. I need something different. I need something, whatever. When the truth is, you probably just need to be reminded of stuff that you've already heard. I mean, think about Abraham. Like when God shows up to Abraham in this text, he tells him the exact same thing twice. And I bet that wasn't the first or the second time he heard it. I bet his dad probably told him that too. Why? He just needed to be reminded of what he already knew. And that's why there's such value in spending time in prayer. That's why there's such value in reading the Bible. That's why there's such value in coming and worshiping and sitting under the teaching of the Bible, because there's something there where it's like maybe we're not walking out with like some new revelation, but we're reminded of things that we need to know today. But even if you think about Isaac, okay, there's some real good stuff he does. He stays. He builds this altar. He does the stuff that he's supposed to do. But there's that one part where he doesn't. And what I like the way the commentator Kent Hughes talks about it. It's almost as if in that moment he was aware of the promise because he'd heard it, and then he does what he does. It's like he's aware of it, but he forgot at the same time. And isn't that what we do when we say? I like that Kent Hughes said it this way. He says it this way. He said Isaac might have believed theologically that God was with him. But he didn't believe it enough that he held it in his heart. Like he knew if he'd been like, hey, what's the promise? I'm going to be like the stars. But in that moment, though, it wasn't in his heart in a way that it caused him to trust him. And then I look at the part here at the end, and I don't think it's anything like super profound. I don't know that anyone's going to get this verse tattooed on your arm unless you really like Wells. But I think it's a really, really good verse because it shows this balance of how we should live in the present. Look at this in verse 25. It says he built an altar and he dug a well. Doesn't really seem like much, but it shows us how we should live our lives. That there should be this spiritual awareness and trust in what God is doing. And there also should be this practicality in how we live our lives too. That Isaac doesn't just say, well, God showed up, he made this promise to me, I'm just going to sit here and bask in his presence. No, he's like, hey, but we got to still find water. Like if there's no water, this altar, we're all just going to be dead around it. So let's keep digging for these. And I think that sometimes what we do is it's a tension that we manage. It's this tension of the spiritual and the practical. And we have to be so careful not to find ourselves heading too far to one extreme or the other. That if you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to pray about this and I'm not going to do anything. That is incredibly unwise. But if you're of the type that's like, you know what? I'm just going to work really hard. I'm going to grind it out and it's going to be okay. Well, then you're ignoring the fact that there's a God in this universe who wants to work in your lives. And so what you see Isaac do here is he has this tension and he walks in both of them very well, which is how we should walk in the present. It's being aware of both the spiritual and also the practical. And then finally, you see the future. That the future is clearly on display. And it's in the future we have to trust that God will carry the long-term effects of our decisions into the future. Like that he will carry the long-term effects of our decisions today. And there's like a good to that and there's a bad to that. Like, you're here and you got kids. They're not going to do what you say. They're going to do what you do. Like, it doesn't, like, and as a parent, like, there should be a weight that you feel in that. Like, it's one thing to tell them something is important, but man, if your life says it's not, then they're not going to believe that. And the long-term effects of that, you'll see that it'll happen. There's also the positive, where it's like the things that you're doing, that you're instilling in your families. Man, that it has the power to impact generations. I mind you, that part of what I find so fascinating, Abraham's dead. Like, he's dead. The promise was to Abraham, and yet even though Abraham is dead, God is continuing to fulfill his promise to Abraham through Isaac. And And he's doing it in spite of Isaac. And it just shows that God is, that he works in our decisions. Some of you, maybe you're so afraid because you're trying so hard and you have people that you just want to influence and you know that like you're losing your like control, right? Hey, God, he's in the future. He's there. And that there's no way that we'll be able to do it perfectly, but we can be confident that where we're lacking, he can pick it up. You know, and as I think about this text, I cannot help but think about Jesus. Because Jesus is in the past, present, and future in your life. And I think about this verse in Hebrews chapter 13, and it says this about Jesus. It says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That he's the same in the past, he's the same in the present, he's the same in the future. And so maybe some of you are sitting here and I talk about the past and you just feel so guilty. You look back and even when I talk about it, you're just like, there's a weight that you feel that you just wish you didn't. Jesus Christ is the same in the past that he is in the present. And he's meaning. What is he doing in the past? He's forgiving you. He offers you grace for the things that weigh you down. The reason why Jesus Christ came and died and rose, part of it was to forgive you of the things that you've done in the past. And what you have to do is you got to trust that he's there doing that. He's the same. He's also with you in the present. That he desires to walk alongside you. That in those moments where you're trying to figure out what decision you need to make or you want to do it all right, he's right there with you. He wants to be with you. And he's also in the future. The situations that you hope to influence where you will not be there, he is there. And you can trust that he knows what he's doing. That his ultimate desire for the future is that he would be with you in the future forever. And the way that you get to experience that is by putting your trust in what he did in your past and what he can do in your future and what he will do in your present. Do you trust that? Is that where you put your hope? Let's pray. Father, we love you and we're thankful for Jesus. We're thankful, God, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God, we are thankful that we can trust him, that we can know him, that he forgives us, and that he goes before us. And so I just pray, God, right now, of everyone in this room, everyone listening online, that maybe there are people, and God, what they need is they need to know that you're in their past. They need to know that you have forgiven them. Maybe there are people who need to put their trust in the fact that you've forgiven them. I don't know, but I pray they would. Maybe there are people right now in this moment, and what they need to be reminded of is they need to be reminded of your presence. God, that you are with them, that you don't want to leave. You said you'd never leave them or forsake them, and I just pray that in this moment they would be aware of that. And that you'd help all of us to trust your control in the future. God, that you're there. You're working in ways we can't see, and you're also preparing a place for us where we can be with you forever. God, help us to put our trust in you. God, it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Love you guys.
Thank you so much for checking us out online today. We hope it was a blessing and an encouragement to your life.
And if you would like to give today, there are two ways you can do so. You can text your amount to 84321, or you can go to giving.nlspringfield.com.
Also, if you are new here, we have Party with the Pastors the first week of each month. We would love to see you there.
We get to know you better, and you get to know us a little better too. And also, we have services every Sunday at 8, 9:30, and 11, and we'd love to see you in person.
We will see you next week.